Most busy men don't want to be athletes. They don't want bodybuilding trophies. And they definitely don't want their life to revolve around the gym. What they do want is surprisingly simple. They want three things. They want to build muscle, they want to drop fat, and they want to live healthy without burning out, breaking down, or giving up their life to do it. And if you're watching this, chances are that's you. You've probably tried traditional fitness programs before. Maybe you followed a structured plan. Maybe even worked for a while. But eventually, real life got in the way. Work got busy. Family responsibilities increased. Energy dropped. Motivation faded. And the system just collapsed. Here's the uncomfortable truth no one tells busy professionals. Traditional fitness programs aren't designed for you. They're designed for people with time, with energy, with daily gym access, with lives that already revolve around fitness. And when those systems try to tackle muscle building, fat loss, and health all at once, they become impossible to sustain. In this video, I'm going to break down why these three goals are so hard to achieve together, why traditional fitness programs fail busy men, and most importantly, how I designed the ONE35 Body System to make all three simple, realistic, and sustainable, even with a full life. This isn't about doing more, it's about doing less, but doing it right. Now, from my experience, these are the top three reasons people actually want to get into shape. The first of those is they want to build muscle. Number two is drop body fat. And number three is they want to live healthy. Now, different people might have that in different orders, but in my view, the most important is to build muscle. Now, here's why. If you look at this picture here, it's a picture of a young, healthy thigh muscle. So loads of muscle, full to the brim. But what most people don't realize is that when you hit your 30s, every decade you're losing about 3 to 5% of that body mass if you're inactive. And by the time you get to your 50s, that becomes 1 to 2% every single year. And when you hit your 80s, you've lost already around 30 to 50% of this young, healthy body mass. So this is what a thigh muscle, a sarcopenic thigh muscle looks like when it's degraded. That's why, in my view, and the view of science nowadays, is that training, resistance training, is actually more important when you're older than when you're younger. Because when you're older, your muscle is starting to deteriorate. Now, this is a quote from the late Mike Mosley. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. But he said clearly, unless you do resistance exercise, your muscles start to decline after the age of 30, as I've shown you. However, your muscles have an amazing, a remarkable ability to regenerate in response to resistance training. So that's why putting on muscle as you get older is more important than dropping fat and living healthy. And as mentioned, it's more important when you're older than when you're younger. Now, let's look into why traditional fitness programs fail in this fundamental important aspect of building muscle. So let's have a look at why traditional fitness programs fail you or have failed you in trying to put on muscle. Have a look at this image. Guy lifting weights. Now, in most people's minds, this is what you need to do in order to lift or to grow muscles. You need to pump iron. You need to lift weights. But I'm going to show you why weights do build muscle, but there's such an inefficient tool in doing that. Let's break down a muscle building exercise into its three phases of motion. Now, every muscle building exercise has these 3 phases of motion. There's step or number 1, which is the concentric, which is when you're contracting the muscle. Number 2, which is the isometric, which is when you're holding that weight or resistance in a static position. And step number 3, which is the eccentric, which is when you're lowering the weight or retracting the muscle back to its elongated phase. Now, which of these phases do you think weight training actually utilizes? It's the concentric phase of motion. Why is that? Because when you're contracting the muscle, you're lifting the weight against gravity. So weights work against gravity. When you're holding the weight in a static position, which you can do with weights, you don't tend to do that because it could be putting your joints at a disadvantage or in a dangerous position, because you generally need to hold it when the weights are most active, but a lot of times it's also when your body or your joints are at their weakest. So you generally only overloading the concentric phase of motion. Now, the eccentric is actually when the weights are not working against resistance, they're actually helping you. Why? Because the eccentric phase is when you're retracting the muscle back to its elongated phase, and you're normally lowering the weight back down to the ground, which is when gravity is actually helping you. Does that make sense? But let me show you this next slide. Which of the phases of motion, concentric, isometric, and eccentric, do you think the weights or your muscles have the most power? Let me show you. The eccentric phase of motion is when your muscles have around 30% more power than the concentric. But the problem is that weights, when you're lowering them, are actually working with gravity, and rather than making it harder, they're actually easier because gravity is helping you on the way down. Does that make sense? Here's the big problem. Your muscles have most propensity to grow in that eccentric phase of motion, not in the concentric phase. The next strongest phase of motion for your muscles is actually the isometric, when you're holding that weight in a static position, which, as mentioned, if you do tend to do that, you are going to be putting your joints in a potentially injury prone position. And the weakest phase of motion is actually the concentric. So weights overload the weakest part of the weakest phase of motion. That's why they're such an inefficient tool to build muscle. I hope this is making sense. That's why you need to spend such a long time in the gym, 3 to 5 days a week, trying to put on muscle, because weights are such an inefficient tool to do that. You can definitely put on muscle using weights. All the bodybuilders, or almost all the bodybuilders, do use weights. All those big guys you see in the gym are using weights, but they're spending such a long time in the gym to put on that muscle. So, as a busy professional, I'm guessing you don't have 3 to 5 days a week to spend in the gym. Your goal is to put on maximum muscle in minimum time. But the problem with weights is they put on minimum muscle in maximum time. They're such an inefficient tool for the job. That's why I say weights waste your time. And that's why, as a busy professional, you haven't been able to maintain any significant muscle growth. But don't take my word for it. Dr. John Jaquish has done a whole doctorate on the subject, and he's entitled his book, Weightlifting is a Waste of Time. Yes, it does build muscle, but it takes such a long time to build that muscle. Now let's look at reason number 2, which is burning fat. Now, traditional training programs, the fitness industry, they tell you in order to burn fat, you need to do two important things. First thing is cardio, which is to expend extra energy. And the second thing is to calorie count your food to reduce your energy input. Now, here's a really important thing that you need to understand. Your body has two fuel types. It has fast fuel and slow fuel. Now, you're probably thinking, what on earth is fast fuel and slow fuel? Well, I'm about to show you. Fast fuel is carbs, which your body converts into glucose to be used as fast energy. And if it's not used, it can be stored as glycogen in your body to be used at a later date. Now, your body's preferred fuel type is actually glucose. Why is that? It's because it's the easiest to turn into your body's fuel currency, which is ATP, adenosine triphosphate. That's what your body uses as its energy currency. And carbs or glucose is the easiest to convert into ATP. Hope that makes sense. Now, your body also has slow fuel. And what's slow fuel? Fat. Fat is also another energy source for your body or fuel source for your body, but it takes a lot longer for the body to turn fat into fuel, so it prefers to use glucose. Here's the thing. When you're doing cardio, which the fitness industry tells you to burn fat, what you're burning isn't fat. You're primarily burning your fast fuel. Now, why is that? Because your fast fuel is primarily used when you're doing high intensity, high force activities. So if you're running and you're breaking out a sweat, or it's above a slow pace, your body is going to be using its fast fuel. Why? Because it needs energy quickly. It can't rely upon fat because, as mentioned, fat takes a lot longer to turn into ATP, your body's energy currency. So it's going to primarily rely on glucose, your fast fuel. So you're not actually burning that much fat when you're doing cardio, when you're doing jogging, when you're doing spinning, when you're doing, fast cycling. You're actually burning carbs. And the scientific literature is actually very clear on this, that cardio doesn't burn fat. So all those morning joggers you see out in the morning, all those spinning classes and those, boxercise classes that are mainly burning carbs is the reason you're not burning fat, because you're doing activities that aren't burning what you want to burn, which is fat. Now let's look at the other side of the equation, which is reducing your energy intake. Now, the traditional fitness programs and training programs provided by the fitness industry tell you that you need to be in a calorie deficit. And in order to be in a calorie deficit, you need to count every calorie you put in your mouth. Now, that does work, but only for a limited period, because you're not giving your body enough energy to do its daily chores. So what your body ends up doing, whilst it does work for a limited period of time, it starts to reduce your energy output to balance the books. Does that make sense? But have you ever wondered what a calorie actually is? A calorie is a 100-year-old measure where a kilogram of calories raises the heat of 1 milliliter of water by 1 degree. So they actually burn food to raise the temperature of water. That's not how your body uses food. Proteins have calories, carbs have calories, and fats have calories in this measure. But proteins, for example, aren't really used by the body for fuel. They can be in extreme circumstances, but it's not a calorie of protein isn't really used by the body for fuel. Also, depending on how you cook a calorie, a celery, for example, It can be diced and cooked in different ways and it'll give you a different calorie output. So a calorie is a terrible measure to look at how the body uses the food you eat. That's why calories don't count. Now, don't take my word for this either. Look at the work and the book written by Dr. Giles Yale of Cambridge University, who wrote the book, Why Calories Don't Count. Now, let's look at reason number 3, which is healthy living. Now, we all want to live healthier, but the reality of it is that living healthier and shifting from the way you're living now, the way you're eating now, is a huge shift to take and is probably, in my view, the most difficult part of any body transformation, because you're asking someone to completely change how they're living their lives, which is very difficult to do. And what I've experienced is that when people sort of break the first rule, they have a cake, they miss a training session, they miss a cardio session, they want to have an ice cream, the whole meal plan goes out of the window. And out of the window, not only goes the meal plan, but their whole body transformation. Because they think in their minds, well, I've had that cake, I've had that chicken and chips, I might as well have a pizza, I'm going to run it off in the gym. And then one bad food becomes another bad food, becomes one missed session becomes another missed session. And then you throw out the whole body transformation. Because living a healthy life is hard to adapt to and extra hard to maintain. And from my experience is the main cause of yo-yo dieting. Now, what's yo-yo dieting is when you're in and out of shape, or you're yo-yoing from one diet to another, and you always get the sense that, well, this isn't for me. It's not for my lifestyle. I'm so busy. I like these type of foods. I can't sleep early. All of these reasons you're giving yourself, which is why you probably haven't been able to successfully get into shape and maintain being in shape. That's why, in my view, living healthy, you have to look at it in the long game. You can't look at it as something you do from the get-go. It's something that you have to introduce small, bite-sized pieces at a time. And trying to do it from day one is a sure recipe for failure. So here's the big takeaway. The problem was never your discipline. It was never your motivation. And it was never a lack of effort. The problem was the system. Traditional fitness tries to make you build muscle, burn fat, and live healthy all at the same time at full intensity. For a busy man, that's a recipe for burnout. What I did with the ONE35 Body System was simple but different. I separated those goals. I made muscle building simple and time efficient. I made fat loss automatic, not obsessive. And I made healthy living something you grow into, not something you're punished with from day one. That's why this works when everything else fails. You don't need to train more. You don't need to eat perfectly. You don't need to overhaul your life. You just need the right sequence, the right stimulus, and a system that respects reality. If this resonates with you, if you're tired of starting over, tired of extremes, and tired of fitness competing with your life, then I'd encourage you to watch the other episodes on this channel. This entire channel exists to show you how to train less, live more, and still get into the best shape of your life. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode.